Earlier, we talked at length about identifying and managing risks. Risk management is absolutely critical to a project's success, so in this video, we'll introduce additional techniques for managing risks. Let's start with a reminder of the definition of risk management. Risk management is the process of identifying potential risks and issues which could impact a project, then evaluating and applying steps to address the effects of the identified risks and issues. One way to manage risks and hopefully prevent any risks from materializing is to focus on managing the changes and dependencies as well as any scope creep in your project. If you can manage those two things, both changes and dependencies and scope creep, other types of risks become much easier to manage. If your dependencies are met on time, your team is less likely to fall behind schedule. If your scope is tightly managed, you're less likely to incur changes to your budget or be forced to extend your timeline. Brainstorming with your team is one of the most effective techniques for identifying risks in a project. Your teammates likely bring skills and experience from previous projects, which can help suss out similarities and keep you from repeating any issues. As we brainstorm with our team, it's best to create a risk register. As a refresher, a risk register is a table or chart that contains your team's list of risks. You'll want to pose questions to your team like, what could improve the outcome of the project? Or what could hurt or hinder it? You'll list them all as if-then statements. For example, if a given event happens, then here's how the project is impacted. To help prioritize risks within your risk register, you can calculate your risk exposure. Risk exposure is a way to measure the potential future loss resulting from a specific activity or event. A good method to calculate risk exposure is to build a matrix, like this one. When building out your matrix, you'll use two variables, risk impact and probability. Write risk impact at the top, horizontal axis, and write probability on the side, vertical axis. Mark high, medium, and low along each axis as well, across the top, from left to right, and down the side, from top to bottom, because that's how you're going to chart risk exposure. Add each risk to the chart at the cross-section of the impact the risk might have on your project and probability or likelihood of the risk coming to pass. This is one technique, but whatever strategy you use to examine your risk exposure, your risks will need to be prioritized so that you know and your team knows which ones to give immediate attention to. For anything that has a high impact on your project, even if it has a low probability of occurring, make sure to have a mitigation plan in place. How will you handle this risk if it actually materializes? While a risk register is a great tool, it's still likely that some unforeseen risk will arise. It's almost impossible to account for every single risk over the course of a project. That's where the ROAM technique can help. The ROAM technique, which stands for resolved, owned, accepted, and mitigated, is used to help manage actions after risks arise. Once a risk has materialized, you need to decide what to do with it. If a risk has been eliminated and will not be a problem, it goes into your resolved category. If you give a team member ownership over a certain risk and entrust them to handle it, that risk goes into the owned category and is monitored through to completion. If the risk has been accepted, it has been agreed that nothing will be done about it. Finally, if some action has been taken such that the risk has been mitigated, either reducing the likelihood of it occurring or reducing the impact to the project, it goes into the mitigated category. After each risk is placed into a category, the team will discuss each risk and decide which should be prioritized. Awesome! Now you've learned a bit more about how to differentiate risks and issues, as well as some new techniques to manage various risks. Next, we'll learn about how to share these risks with your stakeholders in a technique called escalation. Sound intriguing? Head to the next video to learn more.